The Albion Online community isn't particularly happy about the state of Albion right now. I mean, the last two major content updates for Albion Online have been, for lack of a better word, hot garbage. Beyond the Veil was sort of salvaged after the fact, but still wasn't a great look, and the most recent update, Wild Blood, well, it isn't the worst thing ever, but it took a full year of development time, and I haven't heard a single person that actually thinks the update is good. So, what's the deal? How did we get from a rapidly growing game with a mostly happy player base to what we have now? Well, 3 years ago, Sandbox Interactive made a decision that has led to the slow poisoning of a game I once loved and the inevitable death of Albion Online. In late December of 2020, Sandbox Interactive, the creator of Albion Online, was bought out by a financial investment company called Stillfront. The Albion Online community was very concerned about what this meant for the game, and rightfully so. You see, Stillfront is a company that specializes in free-to-play mobile games. Before Sandbox Interactive, Stillfront had already purchased 16 other companies or game studios, and of the last 14, 13 of them were studios that focused on mobile games, most of which were free-to-play. Now, for those of you who haven't ever dabbled in the free-to-play mobile game world, there's one thing that these games are pretty well known for. Yeah, the monetization structures of free-to-play mobile games are really not great. And so, as you might expect, the Albion Online community was quite concerned about what this meant for Albion, especially when it came to things like pay-to-win. But SBI was very quick to assure everyone that there was no reason to worry and there were no changes coming to the payment model of Albion, because Stillfront's philosophy is to have a very hands-off approach. No, seriously, it's a hands-off approach. Guys, it's a hands-off. Yeah, okay, basically every time somebody asked about it, they just said, Stillfront has a hands-off approach, guys. Trust us, everything will be cool. But what does a hands-off approach actually mean? Well, let's ask Stillfront themselves.
That is because we have a very decentralized approach that is really, based on trust. We don't integrate. There's no forced integration. There's no need to go into a common technical platform. There's none of that. I mean, the integrations that we have really are, centralized data analytics. But then, we don't integrate. We let studios run themselves.
Now, don't get me wrong, this sounds great, but you have to remember everything has its equal and opposite. And to save you all a lecture on game design, finances, and market economics, I'm going to summarize into 2 key points. 1, Stillfront is really only looking at stats or data from Albion and letting SBI handle everything else. However, Stillfront is a financial group, which at the end of the day really only cares about profits, and so those stats are player numbers and financial stats. 2, in a free-to-play game, a focus on increasing profits almost always has a direct negative impact on the quality of the game, such as raising the silver cost of premium prices leading to more premium sales, but detracting from the enjoyment of the game by most of the player base. One of the biggest roles of a game designer is to work around these issues as much as possible. So what these 2 things mean is typically the more pressure Stillfront puts on SBI to make money, the worse the game is going to get. The more Stillfront looks at these financial stats and tells SBI to make them better, the more SBI has to fit in suboptimal updates to the game that focus on profits. How much pressure will Stillfront put on SBI to increase their numbers? Well, this is how well Stillfront has been doing since late 2020 when they purchased SBI. Now, saying that if Stillfront wants to make money on Albion, the game will get worse is very simplified and also very theoretical. So what has it actually done, and what will it continue to do to Albion Online? Well, let's do a thought experiment. It's 2020, you're SBI, how do you make more money off the Albion player base? Well, very quick business lesson, there are 3 places to make more money. 1, expand to new customers, such as getting more new people to play Albion. 2, take the current customers that aren't paying much, or in Albion's case, aren't paying anything, and get them to start paying money. And 3, get the current players who do spend money to spend even more money. Every single change in Albion since the start of 2021 can clearly be traced back to one of these 3 motives. For example, 1. The server split and bringing Albion to Asia, a controversial decision motivated by bringing in new customers, new players to Albion. 2. The premium price increase. SBI over doubled the in-game cost of premium so that players that typically spent in-game silver now have to spend real-life money if they want to maintain premium. But the biggest one though, and the one I want to focus on because I believe it to be the part that has hurt Albion the most, is trying to get the paying Albion players to pay more. Because this is the sort of poisonous mobile free-to-play game monetization that Stillfront is familiar with and loves doing. You can see it by just how excited Stillfront is by Albion's
revenue retention that they show, 96% revenue retention, 96% revenue retention.
Now, not going into too much depth, a higher percentage revenue retention for a game like Albion means that a lot of profit comes from cash cows, the occasional player that spends a ton of money on Albion buying gold, skins, premium, whatever. So how do you make them, the cash cow, spend more money? Let's just, take a little look at the content updates we've had since Stillfront Takeover, shall we? First up, in March of 2021, we got Call to Arms. Now, I wasn't entirely sure whether to include this one or not because its development cycle was likely well underway before the Stillfront acquisition, but it really plays into this milking the cash cows mentality, so I think at least parts of it were heavily related. The main content in Call to Arms was the faction warfare rework. And one of the main parts of this was creating a new rewarding form of non-full loot PvP. Before this update, faction warfare was always full loot, even in blue and yellow zones, and there were IP caps in all blue and yellow zones. By changing it to non-full loot and removing IP caps, they created a perfect environment for those cash cows that love to run around beating everyone with their 8.3 and 8.4 gear. Which is exactly what happened. Blue and Yellow Zone faction warfare is now overrun by these high tier players even 2.5 years after the update dropped, despite that being the main criticism from the community for the Call to Arms update. After the Call to Arms update, the lack of IP caps was the biggest complaint of the community because it was heavily favoring those with a big wallet. So naturally, many people, myself included, didn't really understand why SBI got rid of the IP caps in these safe zones, but now it's starting to make a little more sense. Because next was the Lands Awaken update later in November of 2021. This update focused mainly on visual reworks and new systems like Might and Favor, but one of the main content updates was the addition of elite levels, ways to pay a large amount of silver and fame to gain shiny badges on your gear and a decent advantage in IP over those without. Again, another system that is very attractive to the cash cow, but ultimately increases the inequality between players, allowing for greater element of pay to win, a harsher curve for new players, and just overall creating a worse game. Then we started 2022 with the Into the Fray update, which honestly was a good update. It really didn't have anything that feeds into this milking the game dry mentality. We got the Magic Staves overhaul, Portal Towns, Castle Outpost reworks, daily events, the Journey Back mechanic, and the Arena rework. The only one that really feeds into this milking mindset is the Arena rework, which added non-lethal Crystal Leech that, while they do have IP caps, if you're familiar with them at all, know that they're pretty soft caps and that still greatly benefit those that have swiped for their 8.3 and 8.4 gear. But then we start getting into the really egregious patches. In November of 2022, we got the legendary Beyond the Veil patch. There were two things in this patch that were prime milkers for these cash cows, really top-notch stuff: pristine resources and the mists. Pristine resources is quite obvious. New, flashy, best gear in the game opportunity that seemingly has no real good reason to exist other than its flashiness and attraction for cash cows. And the mists, while similar to faction warfare, are another perfect environment for people who like to, for lack of a better word, pay to win. Both yellow and lethal mists were very intentionally designed in a way that benefits the person who's willing to spend money on the game, the person that swipes for their fancy gear and elite spec, as is evident by basically any mist today, and SBI's radio silence on the matter, despite it being the almost unanimous sentiment from the game's community that this is one of the worst parts of the mists. Lastly, and most recently, was Wild Blood, where things get stepped up another notch. Now, I could just talk about awakened weapons here, because, they're awakened weapons, the obvious pay to win, the cash grab, the insane imbalancing, etc. But But I actually think the way shape-shifting weapons and tracking were introduced is almost more of an insight into this new Stillfront cash cow milking mentality. When the update was released, because all the content relied on rewards from tracking and people had to level it up and there's a lot of people that are going to be doing it, SBI did the smart thing of increasing the amount of tracks in the world. However, along with this, they did something that really puzzled me at the start. They made it so that all the extra tracks, so 2/3 of the total tracks out there, did not have the chance to drop shape-shifting artifacts. Why would they do this? The only thing this does, besides make tracking even more frustrating, is it keeps a very small amount of the artifacts being put into the game or the markets, which keeps these very cool, new, unique shapeshifter weapons very expensive and exclusive. So instead of giving the player base more of a chance to engage with this cool new content that you spent so much time developing, you're so proud of, and is the main selling point of the update, you are, on purpose, making it hard to get and use for most people. I can't think of a good reason to do this except for tantalizing your cash cows to spend more money to get their hands on a long-awaited shapeshifting weapon. Basically, every single major content update, except for maybe the Into the Fray update, has had at least something that screams cash grab, something that I wouldn't expect to see in the game or think is a good idea in the game unless you think about it in terms of milking cash cows. Taken together, Albion Online is no longer being developed with the primary goal of becoming the best game it can be. Rather, it is being developed with the primary goal to make money, which, don't get me wrong, being a good game is definitely a big part of, but no longer the primary goal. This is why I say Albion Online is dying. Stillfront, the company that effectively owns Albion Online, is a financial company that only really cares about how much money the game profits. And so even if Stillfront was doing well, which they're not, they're going to be consistently putting pressure on SBI to have the game make more money. The way for SBI to do this is to create content and patches that cater to mostly cash cows, a very small subset of the Albion player base. And unfortunately, thus far, SBI has struggled to do this in a way that also maintains high quality updates, as is evident in almost every patch since Stillfront acquired Albion Online. So Albion Online is past its peak. The best parts of Albion's life are gone, and it's only downhill from here. But that's just something that happens, you know, it's the natural life cycle of entertainment in the world we live in. I'm sure many of you have had your favorite show or movie franchise or even other game that went through something similar. It gets popular, attracts attention, the bigger players in the market with the bigger wallets, they come in, take control, milk it for everything they can before discarding it. Luckily, SBI is quite good at developing Albion Online. Stillfront isn't that hands-on and way better than some of the other sharks in the industry, and despite some weak updates, Albion Online is still a great game that is worthy of your time and will be for some time to come, so it's not all bad. Really, this video is a rant more than anything about my disappointment in what Albion has become and my lack of hope for its future. All things considered though, Albion is a good game, but it could be better, and sadly, it's never going to be. Now, before I end this video, I want to throw in two very important notes. Please don't skip this section. One, this video is a conspiracy theory, and so you shouldn't trust it. And two, I'm not blaming Stillfront or SBI for killing Albion Online. Starting with the first of those, there was very little fact presented in this video. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes at Stillfront or SBI. All I've done is taken a look at the past 3 years since Stillfront acquired SBI, tried to theorize about what that would look like and what it would change in Albion, and then compared that to what actually has happened the last 3 years. I'm pulling super biased correlations between things that might not be correlated at all. Who knows? The fact that so much content has been added that's perfectly designed for the really rich players who swipe Nan's credit cards they can go dump on noobs with their better gear and spec could just be a coincidence. SBI might not have had a profit-driven mindset for those decisions at all. It's all just a conspiracy of confirmation bias, and you shouldn't trust me without looking into it for yourself. But to me, Occam's razor tells me it's probably what's going on. Second, I think both SBI and Stillfront made good decisions. SBI in late 2020 was looking towards a mobile release of their game and got offered $130 million to buy out their company from someone who is very well situated and versed in the free-to-play mobile game market. Honestly, probably a great decision on SBI's part to take that deal. If I was in their situation, I probably would too. And Stillfront, I don't know anything for certain about how they're influencing Albion Online, but I absolutely cannot blame a financial investment company for trying to have their investment make as much money as possible. They're literally just doing their job. Could they be doing it better and in a way that helps maintain Albion's strength in the market? Probably, but it's hard to blame them for that. I'm pretty sure they're doing their best. So the point is, I'm not trying to throw shade or blame at anyone in this video, and I definitely don't want you guys to take this as anything more than a conspiracy theory. But for me, researching Stillfront and the changes Albion has gone through since their acquisition of SBI has opened my eyes to a trend that makes sense to me, and explains a lot of the questions I had about the game and its development trajectory. So, if nothing else, this video was a way for me to let Albion Online go for good.